There you go. So I'm going to talk about personal branding, and then I'm going to talk about trends in social media for this year. So the reason why I wanted to talk about personal branding, it does plug into how you present yourself through social media or through your blog or through any of the various means that you can talk to people. So I'm going to focus on personal branding specifically to hopefully get you to your first job out of college. So I'm coming at it from an angle of having learned things from karaoke. So I'm a karaoke aficionado. I go pretty often and I've seen a lot of things. So I really feel like I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, not just the film, but in karaoke. And I feel like I've learned a lot of things about what works and what doesn't and how you present yourself. So that's one thing that I'm going to be talking about through this talk. So like Joey said, this has been a little bit of my professional experience. EA was my first job out of college. And then from there, my career has kind of morphed into being a lot more focused. So now I work for a web development firm called Four Kitchens, where I'm mostly a consultant and I talk with clients and I try to understand their needs and then tell them how they can accomplish their vision. So the reason why I wanted to talk about personal branding is because I've been involved in the hiring process everywhere I've worked. I've looked for anything from interns to developers to designers or admins, office managers, you name it. I've looked for a variety of those, skills at very different organizations, and I've always seen things that I'm like, it just kind of makes me squirm, and I kind of want to impart my knowledge, especially on young people like you, when you're going to get out of college and you're going to be looking for a way to present yourself and get that first job. So I've really seen every trick in the book to try to get someone's attention, to try to get an interview or try to get hired. So what I'm going to talk about today is specifically personal branding and how you can present yourself to get through that door. So these are three things that I've learned, I feel, from karaoke. So the first thing is don't go full Broadway. The second thing is polish your branding. And the third thing is define your set list. So the first thing I want to talk about is not going full Broadway. So you can do too much. That is such a thing. This is where I'm coming from with this. Story time. I used to work at an agency, and there was a girl, she really wanted to get hired, so she sent a little mini Etch-a-Sketch. And she sent it to one of the account executives, and the Etch-a-Sketch had like her name on it, like it was really intricate. She obviously spent a lot of time on it. And then it had a letter saying like, if you really want someone that thinks outside of the box, you should hire me. And we were like, we're not hiring for anything right now, so we can't really do anything. Even if you were awesome and you were thinking outside of the box, like we don't have a position open right now. So I kind of felt like she was trying too hard to get noticed. She didn't even pay attention to the fact that we weren't looking for anyone at that time. And I looked at the postage, and it cost her $5 to mail that Etch-a-Sketch because it was pretty heavy. So that's a situation in which I first noticed, like, hey, you can try too hard. So my example, I'm sure you've all seen games where they're gonna sing the national anthem and someone gets on stage and they take forever to sing the national anthem because they're really trying to show off their vocal skills. So they're like, oh, say, can, and you're like, oh my gosh, can you just say a sentence without like having to like go through your whole vocal range? So in the hiring process, this is what ends up happening. This is what I related to. So my most recent experience was hiring for a developer and hiring for an office manager. And I saw a lot of resumes that had a lot of these skills all for one position. So they're a developer and they're like, I'm a developer, but I'm also a designer and I'm also a musician and I'm also a photographer. I'm also a social media expert. I also have my own company, so I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a CEO. And I'm like, okay, so then why are you applying for a job here? So it really sends a mixed signal. Now, if you're in the Convergent Media Collective, you're probably really multi-talented. You probably do a lot of things really, really well. So I know that it kind of sounds like, oh, but we all do a lot of different things. We all have a lot of different types of experience and things that we bring to the table, so I don't know what to do. So from my perspective, as a hiring person, I'm going to think that if you tell me you can do all those things, I'm going to assume that you're either a liar or that you're expensive. So either way, you're probably not going to get hired. So why? It's kind of thinking about this idea of like jack of all trades, master of none. And like I said, I'm guilty of like being able to check several of the boxes that I presented earlier. So I feel like there's a jack of all trades in all of us. Like there are many things that we all bring to the table. We all have many talents. But I kind of see it as this. It's like the damn printer that they say they do too much and they don't do anything right, and then you end up hating that printer. So like, I mean, this printer is like a fax machine and a scanner and a phone and like, I don't know, it's probably like a modem or a router, like, I don't know, like, I'm just making things up. But it's just like one of those things where it's like, it's an all-in-one thing, and most of the time you want it to print. But because it has all of these other things tacked onto it, it can't print. It can't do the simple thing that you wanted it to do. And if you think about it from a product perspective, when you have a lot of engineers and they're trying to tack on functionality to a product, ultimately one of those peripherals is going to suffer, and it's not going to be 100% great. So again, from a hiring perspective, if you split your time doing a lot of very different things, as an employer, I feel like I'm probably not going to get the best out of you all the time. You also want to protect yourself. So I have seen many, many times postings out there that's like, we want a marketing coordinator, but we also want someone that knows web design and graphic design and social media and SEO and all of these different things. Those jobs are out there, but I'm telling you right now that it's probably not going to be great. You could have a bad time. Why is this? Any job that wants you to do 3 roles or more, it's probably going to work you super hard. They're probably going to work you to the bone. They're going to expect you to do a lot of different things. And they're probably going to pay below the market rate for any of those things. So, for example, what ends up happening a lot of times is that like we have a need for 3 people, but we can only hire 1. So that's what happens. That's why they're going to work you, they're going to give you the workload of all of those 3 people, but they're only going to pay you for 1. And it's likely that's probably going to be below market rate. It's happened to me. My first job right out of college, like I said, was for this gaming company that I really love. But I had 3 jobs, and I was expected to do all those things. And people that were doing my same job were getting paid twice as much, at the very least. But I did it for love. And then I was like, I kind of want to pay rent and stuff and have spending money, so let me go find something else. So I've been there, and I can tell you that it's hard. So after I've gone on that rant of like the weird 3 job for one person sort of thing. Let's go back to talking about being full Broadway. So if you were looking for that job as a designer or a developer or whatever, this is how I would avoid making the mistake of presenting too much. So I would say relevant experience only. Be concise but memorable. I don't need to know your high school jobs. I don't need to know your life story. I was reading a cover story from someone, and they literally opened with, I was born in Iowa in a farm back in blah, blah, blah. And they really proceeded to tell me a long page of their life story. And I was like, I don't really need to know all of that stuff. I just want you to code a website. And mind you, yes, we're still looking for personality. We want to make sure that you're a cultural fit with the company. If I'm gonna bring you in, I wanna make sure that you're gonna be good and that, I can go have coffee with you afterwards, because that's a good team environment, right? But I definitely don't need to know your life story. Be concise, and be relevant, stay on point. You might think, well, I don't have any relevant experience right now. Duh, I'm in school. It's okay. You can connect the dots for me. So, for example, you wouldn't think that a job as a police officer is the same as a job as an office administrator. But I, for reals, got a request from someone applying for an office manager position, and he was a cop in New York City. And he was like, I'm a cop in New York, and I'm interested in your office manager position, blah, blah. And I was like, why are you interested in this? Are you looking for a career change? Did they fire you? What happened there? I don't know. And he didn't explain it to me. So he went on the no pile, even though he could have had a perfectly valid reason. Connect the dots for me. If he had told me, I am currently a cop in New York City, but I am looking to move to Austin, and I'm done with the city life, I'm done being a cop, but this is what I've learned, and I think that I would be a really great fit because of this, this, and this. If he tells me that story, connects the dots for me, then I would give that guy a shot if he made it work, if he had a solid case for how his experience being a cop really applied to this position that I'm hiring for. So that's one way that you can get around the well, I don't really have directly relevant experience. Just tell me that the experience that you do have, tell me how that's relevant to what you're going for. So don't go full Broadway and stay focused, polish your brand. How do I polish my brand? It's knowing who you are. So, this is an article from The Onion that made me laugh, because I am very much an advocate for yeah, you're a person, but you're your own brand. And then I read this article and I realized that it's a very silly thing to say to people, yeah, you should treat yourself like you're a brand. We're not McDonald's, I'm not Target, I'm not a brand. So yes, it's a very silly concept, but if you really think about how you're trying to present yourself in whatever area that you're trying to go for, you're probably going to have some sort of semblance of a public image, whether it's a LinkedIn profile or a Twitter profile or how you present yourself on Facebook, and it really needs to tell a story. So this is the analogy that I'm trying to work with. What's the difference? Here's, well, if you really break it down, they're both dudes, they were both teen heartthrobs, they're both pop artists. Why is one more successful than the other? I really feel that it comes down to positioning and how each of them carries themselves. So Justin Timberlake, to go back to that pretty picture, Justin Timberlake really thinks through. Every time he's gonna release a record, he really thinks through what he's putting out there. I was listening to an interview with him on like NPR of all places, and he was talking about like every album has been like a concept for him. He tries to think about the whole package. So that's why he comes across as a lot more polished and well thought out. He's like a product almost. Whereas Justin Bieber, I hope that I'm not offending anyone here, but like he really comes across more like as a generic pop star. Very obviously, like he's talented, he knows how to sing, he got discovered because he was posting videos of his singing on YouTube, and that's how he got famous. Like, I mean, surely he's talented, but I feel really the difference between them is that one works a lot harder on how he comes across and his positioning, and the things about him are more of a cohesive package. So how do you apply this to your own brand? So this is an example that I really like to use. This girl, her name is Kimberly Bordenaro, and she has a blog called Brandspiration. And her thing is that she really loves music. So in everything that she writes, she always finds some sort of music hook to it. Every blog that she writes starts out with a song or a music video, and she tries to relate that to the point that she's trying to make. And everything about her and her brand and how she presents herself has some sort of music hook. So if you take a look at her photo on her blog, on her About page, she's wearing headphones, and I think the screen is cropping it out, but she's wearing like a Beastie Boys t-shirt. So she's all about music, and that's what she's found. So if you really think about it, she's a marketer. There are a lot of marketers out there, a lot, trust me. They're not all good. They're not all great writers, but there are a lot out there. So how do you differentiate yourself in a sea of a lot of people that are saying a lot of the same things? She found that she really was interested in music, and that was her thing. Her viewpoint from her passion for music, informing her work in marketing, is a unique viewpoint. No one else is going to have that, and that's what works for her. So to recap, she found what's unique about her, she applied it to her work. So in this, she explains it through the pink principle. So this is a quote from her blog. The pink principle works by finding an opening in an oversaturated industry and then finding a genuine position for your brand to fill the gap. This is what she means. Again, 3 pop stars, blonde female singers. How do you differentiate yourself in this space? So she was making the point that, like, well, you know, Britney Spears was like the innocent one, at least when she started. She was like the innocent girl next door, and then Christina was like slightly more edgy. She was a better singer, and then Jessica Simpson came along, and she was really trying hard to be like both of them, and she just never really got very far ahead. I mean, nobody's like going crazy right now saying like, yeah, Jessica Simpson. But then Pink came along into this scene, and I mean, she may not necessarily be Britney Spears, or, I mean, I don't really think that Christina is all that big anymore. I mean, but you know, she may not be on the level of Britney, but she certainly carved a niche for herself within that female blonde singer little niche. So, I mean, she's been around for just as long, and she's still putting music out. So whether you might like her or not, the point that I'm trying to make here, and the point that Kimberly was trying to make with her Pink principle, is that Pink came onto a scene that was already overly saturated, found a gap that wasn't being filled, and filled it. So she was the more edgy, she was the more like rock edge to her, and she found that, she filled that gap, and she stayed there, and she's been very successful doing that. So I would say for this situation, when you're trying to position yourself, you need to find that niche. So you really need to define what works for you. How do you do that? This is where you establish your set list. So what are those things that you do really well? Another lesson I learned from karaoke. So, hey, these are some things that I know how to sing. I know I can sing Bon Jovi. I know I can sing Britney Spears. I know I can sing some Journey. You know what other things I can't sing? I could never do Celine, could never do Whitney. God, I could not do Mariah. I mean, come on. So I know these things, and when I go and I sing karaoke, I'm not gonna pick that. I'm gonna pick these. And hey, guess what? When I go out there and I sing these songs that are like, I mean, if you really think about them, it's not a huge range here. Like, I mean, Bon Jovi, like his range is probably like this big, and like, you know, Britney Spears, her range is probably like, you know, kind of small too. So I mean, they're not very hard songs to sing, but I know how to sing them and I can do it well. And then people are like, "You're so good," and I'm like, You didn't hear me singing Mariah on my way here. That's why you think I'm good. I'm not. I just know what works for me, and that's what I present. That's what I show people. So you want to define your strengths, and you want to stay honest. This is kind of like the same principle when like you go to karaoke and someone is really bad because they're singing Bohemian Rhapsody, and it's like a freaking 7-minute song, and they're really bad, and it's a hard song to sing, you guys. So, of course, people are not going to like it. They're not really putting their best foot forward. They didn't take the time to think about what works for them. So this is how you define your strengths. What are you good at, and what are your interests? So for me, I know that I'm good at marketing, I'm good at social media, I'm good at consulting. My interests outside of work are film, humor, and pop culture. So everything that I do I try to be funny. I try to do it for the lols. If I ever say anything on Twitter, like I'm probably just trying to say it for the lols and try to be funny, because that's just my thing. I like making people laugh, and I like making stupid jokes. So that's who I am.
Do you do it for the lols, and then other people do it for the lols?
Yeah.
Okay.
So those things I just talked about, whatever works for you, that's your frame of reference. So this sets the stage to your unique expertise. Like with Kimberly, she's good at marketing, she was interested in music, she combined that into her brand. And she found that space, she filled it. So what you want to do is try to distill that into a statement that's going to set you apart. So for me, what I say to people, my sort of door opener is that, I know it sounds a little creepy, but I say that I live and breathe the internet, and I'm your ally in staying up to date on the latest trends. So that's just something that my boss at the old agency where I used to work would tell me, like, "Oh man, you really need to send updates on like what's hot, and like you're always going to events, and like you need to tell me, I want to know what's cool." So I worked that into my statement, and this is a part of this, or a version of this, is what's actually on my LinkedIn page. So I tried to sort of distill what I do and what my passion is into a sentence. I'm going to show you a couple of examples. This is Amy Tennyson. She used to be a coworker of mine at Dell. She was the global lead for social media training at Dell. So she was kind of a big deal. And this is how she presents herself. She says, "A girl with a plan who prefers the road less traveled." And it's just a sentence, and it tells me a lot about who she is. And if I'm looking at someone in LinkedIn and I see a lot of social media expert, and then I come across her with this sentence, that really stands out to me, because it tells me two things. It tells me she's organized, because she says, "I'm a girl with a plan." She knows what she wants, she knows how to get there, she knows how to plan and organize for it. So that stands out to me. And then she says, who prefers the road less traveled. So to know what the road less traveled is, you gotta know what the main road is, so that it speaks to her expertise there as well. But then it speaks to her willingness to try things that are new, and her ability to think outside of the box. So in this very short sentence on her LinkedIn page, I was able to gather a lot of information from her. So this is why it's important to really think through what's unique about you and what you want to go out there and do, and try to distill that into some sort of statement that can try to guide you and set you apart. This is another one. This is my friend Elise. She's a front-end developer in Austin. She's also a fellow instructor at Girl Develop It in Austin and at Maker Square, which is intensive program to teach people how to code. But as her day job, she works as a front-end developer. But one of the things that she embraced very early on is a technology called SAS. SAS is a web technology that's a CSS preprocessor. This means that this is what you write before you write CSS. I know it might sound a little bit confusing, especially if you're not really into web technology, but essentially it's like, do y'all know what shorthand is? Like, no, yes, maybe. It's like the little symbols that like people at like the courthouse write when they're like, they represent like a whole word. That's kind of what SAS is for CSS. And it's a relatively new technology that's just starting to gain a lot of traction in the web community. So she was really an early adopter of this technology. And she's been at the forefront of that and championing it and speaking at conferences. So she's really paved the way. So her official title at work is Princess of SAS. So I would generally, as a rule, tell you to stay away from titles like guru or ninja, and I'm gonna talk about that later. But like, I really feel like this works for her so perfectly because she truly can say that she's a princess of SAS, because she's one of the first ones and one of the first female developers to like really get out there and advocate for it. So I feel like it really works well. And she's not just saying like, I'm the princess of front-end development. She specifically honed in on this particular technology called SAS and crowned herself as a thought leader in this space with this title. So I really feel like how she's positioning herself and putting herself forward in this space is really effective. So that's how she brands herself on Twitter. So to talk a little bit more about those other things that you tend to see, especially if you do a LinkedIn search for social media experts, you see a lot of people that are like, I'm a social media ninja, or I'm an SEO rock star, or I'm a whatever guru. I recently, in the latest round of interviews that I did for my job, we were hiring an office manager, and someone said, I want to be the Khaleesi of your office. And I was like, you're going in the no pile. And I love Game of Thrones, okay? But I was like, if you're applying for an office manager position, you don't want to be the Khaleesi of that office. Like, I was afraid of her. I was like, oh my gosh, is she gonna show up with like blood on her face? And like, that's just not the sort of picture that I want to think about for someone. So I would say really be careful, especially something like ninja. If you're a social media ninja, like ninjas are supposed to be quiet. So if you're telling me that you're a social media ninja, you're telling me that you don't know how to do your job right, because you kind of have to be really outspoken to be in social media, right? If you tell me that you're a developer rock star, then I'm gonna think like, okay, you're gonna be late with every timeline that we have. Like, really think through all those things. So let's put it all together. Who is this guy? He's really cute. He kind of looks like he could be in like, I don't know, a band like Daft Punk or something like that. But no. His name is James White, and he goes by the alias of Signal Noise. He's a designer in like Canada. And he has been really hot lately, not like physically, but like just in the industry. He's been speaking at a ton of conferences, and people are really taking note of his work because it's very unique. So this is kind of what has made him famous within the graphic design community, and that's that he does a lot of art prints that have an 80s sort of pop feel. And that's what he's become known for. So if you take a look here, that's a poster for The Thing, and then he also did a poster for Blade Runner for Mondo, who is sort of owned by the Alamo Drafthouse, so they did this limited print run of these posters. Like, that's a pretty big deal if you're a graphic designer and Mondo is asking you to do a poster. Pretty big deal. And he got to do that by really honing in on the things that he was passionate about. So he was a creative director at an agency for a long time before he decided to go on his own. I'm just gonna put this again just so you have something nice to look at. So he wanted to go on his own, and he started doing a lot of just work on his own craft. And he realized that he was really passionate about 80s pop culture and toys and comics. So he started drawing about that and creating prints for that, and people started really taking note. So then he started getting commissions. So he became known for that aesthetic, and now he's getting commissions on that type of work. So he ended up doing the poster for that movie Drive with Ryan Gosling. He did the artwork for the vinyl for that movie. That's like a disc that you put on a thing and it plays music. I don't know how young y'all are if you've ever seen vinyl. But anyway, so it all started because he has a very distinct brand. So again, just like Kimberly, she found that she's a marketer, she loves music, she's gonna put that together. He was like, I'm a designer, I love the 80s, I'm gonna put that together. So even if you take a look at his Tumblr, that's all he posts. He posts a lot of art that's reminiscent of that aesthetic that he's going for. It's not all his art, it's stuff that he finds, but it all follows that same aesthetic of like 80s pop. So if you're looking for some inspiration in that space, like you can check out his Tumblr, and that's even very well thought out. You can check out the logo, it's also very 80s. So that's another way that like his branding extended to even like his Tumblr. Like he thought through every aspect of what he wanted to show. So I think he's a really great example. If you want to learn more about James White, he's a great designer. You can read an interview with him on this website called The Great Discontent. It's kind of like an online magazine, and they talk to a different person that's kind of innovating in their space. So they talk a lot with designers or developers or fashion designers or just people that are very creative. So I would highly recommend The Great Discontent as just a great publication to take a look at, and then specifically his interview if you want to learn more about how he got started with his art. So I think that was a good example of how you present yourself, and especially how you can extend all of that through things like Tumblr. But let's talk some tactics. So 0 to hero is not going to happen overnight. So you want to keep two things in mind. Start small. So where do you want to be and how do you get there? Those are two things that you need to take a look at, and then that should reveal a path for you. So for example, James White, he was working at an agency, he wasn't happy, he knew he wanted to go work on his own. So he was here, he wanted to be here. So then he realized, well, maybe if I start doing a lot of work after work and posting it online, people are gonna notice, and hopefully I can break off on my own. And that's the path that he followed, and now he's where he wants to be. So that's something that you want to do for yourself. Where are you now? Where do you want to go? Try to make yourself a path for how to get there, make a plan for that, stick to it, and you'll get there eventually, and it's okay to start small. I'm gonna use another example from one of my coworkers. His name is Chris Ruppel, and he's a front-end developer. And in the last year, in 2013, he went to go speak at like 3 different conferences, like major ones. Actually, he spoke at South by Southwest. He spoke at a conference called CSS DevConf, which took place in the same hotel where they filmed The Shining. That was pretty awesome. He went to go present to Prague. So he got to like really take his talk to like the next level, got to travel and go to Europe and talk about his expertise. And he started literally talking at small meetups. Then he graduated to camps, and then he graduated to big conferences. Then he graduated to South by, and that's when he really hit the big time. So then he started like applying to other conferences and said like, hey, I spoke at South by, this is the talk. Everyone started going like, yeah, I want to talk to you. But he started by just showing up to meetups and just worked his way up there. So that's another way where it's like, it's okay to start small and it's okay to have a plan as long as you know how to continue to move forward. The other thing is that it's okay to fail. You're probably not going to get it right on the first time. And that's another reason why it's good to start small. That way when you fail, you won't fail on a huge scale. So it's okay to fail as long as you learn something from it and you iterate, because otherwise you're never gonna learn. So a lot of people, especially with social media or things like writing and blogging, they feel a lot of anxiety about going out there with what they're thinking. So I have a lot of friends that say like, why do you say so many things on Twitter? Like, what if someone sees your tweet and then you don't get hired? And I'm like, I don't want to work for someone that doesn't want to hire me because I tweeted something like 2 years ago. And if someone has the time to sit through my Twitter and like look at everything I've said, like, you have a problem. So I personally know a lot of people that say like, you know what, I have this dream of starting this blog. And I think that it really has potential to maybe even turn into a book. But I want to get it perfect. I don't want to launch my blog if I can't get it perfect. So they've been sitting on this idea for like years, afraid that if they go out there and it's not perfect, it's going to be bad. But I think that the worst thing that's happening is that they're not going out there with the content at all. They're not sharing the story that they want to share because they're frozen by their own fear of getting it right the first time. Guess what? It's not going to be right the first time. It's going to take iteration. It's probably going to take a long time of you blogging to really get the feel for what you want to write about, what you want to sound like when you write. How long should your posts be? What should they be about? What works, what doesn't? Once you get a readership that's substantial enough, your readership is probably going to tell you a lot about what they want to hear. And you're going to have to stay receptive to that if you want to continue to be successful. Or you can stick to your gun and be like, I'm just going to write about what I want. And then you're going to lose your readership. So that's why it's okay to fail as long as you learn from it and you iterate on that and you make it better and you're constantly improving it. If you wait until you get it absolutely perfect, you might wait on it a long time. And the thing about the internet right now with social media and other fast ways of communicating is that if you sit on an idea too much, it may become irrelevant by the time that you're done with it. So, actual examples. I wanted to share some examples just to go back to the whole like, how do you present yourself, especially in a sort of professional setting. So these are a few examples that I found of like some resumes that are still a little conventional, but they're outside of the box enough to where I feel like they're really effective. So you can see in this specific example, like the guy only lists a couple of jobs that he's had, so he's not giving me like a huge laundry list of every job he's ever had. He just, and I mean, I don't, from looking at it, I don't know why. It looks like he worked at this one place a long time. Also, this might be a totally fake resume and it's just a template. I don't know. But it has a couple of examples of work It has a breakdown of his technical skills. It has a breakdown of his personal skills, like I'm a really good researcher and I'm really good with analyses and things like that. And then it also lists his education. Now, you might want to be careful with things where you rank things like as a pie chart, like your skills, because I don't want to hire someone that's only like 50% knowledgeable in Photoshop. Like I'm probably going to want to hire someone that's like 100% or so. And then again, if you tell me that you're 100% proficient in Photoshop, I'm going to be like, are you really? So you might want to be a little careful with how you message that, but definitely finding an interesting visual way of listing out your skills is very helpful. This is another resume that I really liked. It's for a designer, and you can actually print his resume and make a box out of it. So I feel like this really works, especially if you want to go into a job that's more like product design oriented. You're actually showing me your skills with your resume, and I think that's really cool. This is another one that I really liked. It's really unconventional. It's kind of like a pamphlet almost. And if you take a look at it really closely, it doesn't list any professional experience, like it doesn't list any jobs, but it talks a lot about like achievement. So like that's a really good way of talking about experience, even if you don't have professional work experience. Achievements is, I feel, a totally legit thing to include. And then also one thing that really that I think is a really good idea is to include your design philosophy. So for example, on our part, when we're looking for developers that don't have a lot of experience yet, we ask them to take us through their development philosophy and sort of how they go about developing, what their process is like. So that's a good way to try to get a feel for someone if they don't have a lot of experience. So that's why I think that's a really good thing to include if you're finding that you want to expand on things that you may not necessarily have a lot of professional experience with. So it's just a couple of things that can hopefully spice up your resume. So checklist. If you're looking for something in tech, I would definitely say think about a website. I'm sure Joey's probably told you, you need a website.
They have a website for the senior portfolio class.
Sweet.
Which is a class that they take when graduating.
Yeah.
The semester they're going to graduate. So I have them make a business card. They have to make a website, and they have to do a 6-month, 5-year plan to kind of start thinking about. Because you went to UT, I mean, they just kind of ship, like, you just fall off the edge.
Yep.
When you graduate, they don't actually have that. They just like, you're done. One semester. So that's why we do it that way here, because I was like, we need to have this stuff in school so that we talk about insurance, we talk about student loans, and I tell them, who's in my senior portfolio class today? Yeah, they hear me lecture, and what did I tell you all today? Y'all can speak up too. Yeah, they're working on their websites, and I'm like, what your website looks like today, and like how you end up making it is who you are. Like, that's what represents you. And so if you think it's, if you take it lightly and you think it's just a joke, then you're just taking yourself lightly and you're just a joke. And that's just the way it's going to be. Like, one of the things I explained to him was that I don't make the rules outside of the classroom, and you're about to be outside of the classroom. So, it's just how it is. I think that's when it comes to branding yourself.
Yep. So you're definitely on the right track if you're already getting a website up. So the next thing that you should think about is how you're presenting yourself. So think through those things about what makes you different in the space where you want to go into. Think about the unique voice that you bring to the table for that particular industry. But then also you might want to think about being involved in relevant communities out there. So for example, if you're a developer, definitely join GitHub, which is a platform for social coding where you can upload your projects and you can even fork someone else's project and make a copy of it onto your own account and then play with it. So it's a good way to show off your projects, your code, and it's also a good way to learn because you get to see what other people are posting. So it's a really great social community for developers. There's also Dribbble, which is a great social community for designers. So on Dribbble, you go and you post shots of designs that you've done, and you actually have to be recruited. You can't just join and be like, here's my work. You actually have to join, and then you're a prospect, and then someone that's already been recruited has to recruit you and actually make you a member of Dribbble. But it's a really great way to see what other designers are working on. Some designers post sketches, and you get to see the evolution of a design. So it's been a really great community online for designers. The same way, like if you're a musician, obviously you probably want to be on something like SoundCloud, or if you want to be a filmmaker, you probably also want to be on something like Vimeo. That's more targeted to people that are more artistic makers as opposed to YouTube, where it's just, I don't know, people talking about their days. Yeah, so that's my checklist. I do have another portion which I wanted to talk about social trends for 2014, but I thought maybe we could take a quick break and then come back.
Okay.
Like 2 minutes.